I think the opportunities are going to be that we're going to see a reconfiguration in how people work when they go to the office. We're going to see a hybrid model where we're going to see more collaboration spaces. We're going to see more people joining from home. So there's going to need to be this constant online connection and really new use cases that allow people to interact in new ways, in more ambient ways as well going forward, rather than always just showing up for a meeting, maybe having always on video in different spaces to do that. And how do you maintain privacy and all of those things? So I think there's a lot of opportunities that'll be developing in that direction.
I mean, we're really excited about this sort of shift from 25 million knowledge workers that were remote prior to COVID, moving up to 150 million sort of coming out of COVID. So, maybe we're at 300 or 400 million today because everybody's sort of still working remotely primarily. But when we do end up in this hybrid model, it's going to land somewhere, estimates are being, around 150 million. So there's a massive shift there in the number of people trying to do work and have good communications, collaboration from remote locations.
But it's when you move into the office, how do you create an environment that the space will adapt around you and give you the tools you need? And then when you're back home, the same thing at your desk. So it becomes a seamless experience between the two.
We definitely see the rise of not just the need of communication, but collaboration as well. And I think the challenge between this hybrid work environment to provide this equitable and seamless experience of both being in the office and at home is real estate. I think.
Yeah, I would say what we're going to see is potentially an increase in meeting spaces.
I do think there'll be a lot of enablement of technology, but in different kinds of spaces and places where it easily allows people to come together. And
I do think that the concept of the meeting room is evolving. It's what I would consider video endpoints or collaboration endpoints. And how do companies either make those permanent or flexible enough to to manage the real estate?
I think it certainly is putting maybe the final nail in the coffin, but I mean, if you're doing phone calls, it's on your mobile phone, not on any kind of hard infrastructure system. So I think we're moving clearly away from that. One of the things we're saying now is that video conferencing is as important as email now. Video conferencing definitely has arrived as a necessity as a result of this experiment we're in now.
There's a tremendous wave that's probably going to come down that's going to influence a lot of telephony and video from a 5G perspective. So I think it's true that I think the expansion of video conferencing as a behavior and a need has risen due to COVID, but I also think that there are specific reasons why telephony is still sort of the backbone or your redundancy, especially if you're mobile. Or you don't have broadband, and you need to have a reliable connection.
I believe we're overstating the death of telephony. It's here to stay for a myriad of reasons. I find myself on conference calls where nobody's on video; they're just on voice. So voice is absolutely important to conferencing. It's the fundamental thing that you always fall back to.
I mean, I'd like to be clear that I'm on record that audio is paramount, not to be equated with telephone calls. So, I do see a shift going on there in the use of the traditional telephone calls, but certainly audio and joining these types of meetings with audio is paramount. That is a critical thing. From my perspective, it'll start in sort of niche areas where it adds the most value. Certainly the gaming industry right now is leading the way. Their products are already spatially using spatial audio and stereo.
Being able to sort of sound natural, remove the distractions of, background noises and all of that, bringing a lot of our power processing to your point on pro audio, which, is probably a standard. It's like, okay, how do we bring all of the goodness of what different industries have done before into video conferencing products and to be able to deliver? Because I think what we need to remember is that what we're trying to do is get everybody to focus on the content that's being communicated and the productive outcomes of our meetings, not necessarily the technology. So I think bringing things like spatial audio and things of that to bring yourself to a more natural environment so that you can be more efficient in what you're communicating is the ultimate goal.
Spatial audio has been coming out with home video systems and sound systems because people want to recreate that cinematic experience. Creating a spatial audio experience here wouldn't make sense unless it's visually represented, right? And that's where AR and VR start to come in, because they excel at that.
A lot of trade shows and event spaces have needed to sort of adapt to virtual environments, and it's almost like going into video production at that point, or live video production. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and a lot of the video conferencing providers, including Google Meet, where we're thinking about that. We have YouTube Live and all those other things. But I think that there's still a lot of innovation left on the table. And there are certain types of events where things may not necessarily work out virtually. For example, CES, right? What does a virtual CES look like, where you can't actually, touch and feel the devices, or, a furniture expo?
It's here to stay, but you're going to see a reduction in use. If people were all suddenly able to go back to the office or go back to school, people will realize it's possible to do things. You might be willing to work that 2 or 3 days home more, but I think you'll see a substantial reduction. I don't think we've been doing this long enough for it to really embed itself in broader society in the way that we might think. People would snap back to their old ways pretty quick. Going to be a hybrid, and that's what's going to embed it further and further into society and cultural aspects over time.
There's been a significant shift in the utilization, and it's not going to go back to where it was pre-COVID.